Hello, good afternoon. So, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the lunch. And logo, let's go ahead with our event, our dialogue. The next panel, Energy Technology Innovation for Sustainable Development, is the only one with 4 speakers and will be chaired by Professor Jacques Markovits, one of the members of the scientific committee. Senior Professor of Strategy and International Affairs at the University of São Paulo. Each speaker will have again 15 minutes for a lecture. After the presentations, Professor Markovits will coordinate the debate until 3 p.m. 35. Dear Professor, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Marcio. On behalf of the organizer, I first of all would like to thank FAPESP and the German authorities that are helping us to have this dialogue. I would like to invite to come to the plenary Philip Negebauer, please, if you want to join us in the table. Then Roberto Scheffer, professor from the University of Rio de Janeiro, Fernando Júnior from Bosch, and Paulo Roberto from Siemens. In the 5 minutes of opening, I would like to refer to 3 aspects. The first one has to do with this dialogue, where we are meeting citizens from Germany and citizens from Brazil, one country with a lot of technology and with finance, but few natural resources, and Brazil, with less technology, less finance, but a lot of natural resources, and our responsibility to protect biodiversity. Then there is another fold in this dialogue, which is academies, civil society, and industry. And the reason why I highlight those two folds of the dialogue has to do with the presential dimension of this dialogue. And the objective is to build empathy. Empathy means to be able to put yourself on the place of the other. And so the dialogue is not a question of keeping ourselves on our side, but also to understand the other one perspective, like it was done this morning. Brazilian understanding just German dynamics, but also our colleagues coming from Germany understanding our specificities. And this is why the informal dimensions of this meeting are very important. The coffee break, the lunch, the dinner. We have to understand where the others stand. And the morning session was extremely important in this sense. When Dr. Veronica Grimm brought to us energy trends, energy barriers and drivers, and then the geopolitical dimension, how important it is. Because then we understand how you combine value and interests. And when she underlined democracy as an asset to be defended and built, this is a responsibility of countries like Germany, the European Union, Brazil, and many Latin American countries. Finally, we had a session that was introduced, and we discussed acceleration of the transition. Acceleration of the transition depends on innovation, depends on technology. But also we have to understand the specificity of our societies that are more and more fragmented and polarized. And this is why in this afternoon we will discuss low-income households and intensive energy use. So the afternoon, in some way, is building up on the morning session. And what we hope by the end of the afternoon is to learn more through our panelists, and we thank them for the preparation of this session, learn more about knowledge, priorities, action, and field of collaboration. Regarding innovation, we have to remember to conclude the S-curve. The S-curve means in innovation that we have to invest, but we will have small results. This is the beginning of the S, low performance and low investment, but the learning curve will need a lot of investment and low performance because still that technology is not mature. So who is going to finance this process of building up technological capabilities? And then at the end of the S, then we have high performance with stable investments. So this S-curve is part of our discussion this afternoon in a context, as Veronica Green mentioned this morning, of uncertainty, unprevisibility. We are in a new era. The black swans are coming, and we can't know from where they will come. So it's in this context that we want to begin our session, and we will begin our session with Professor Philipp Niegebauer from the Babel Smart Cities, but also he's a professor at the University of Applied Science in Düsseldorf for your 15 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, first for the invitation and also for the opportunity to the organizers. I'm delighted to be here, and I will show you very quickly some best practices and strategies for energy technology innovation with the goal of a net zero future. I'm Philipp Niegebauer, I work for Babel Smart Cities. It's a spin-off of a Fraunhofer Institute, and we are based in Germany, Stuttgart, with the headquarters. So I like to start with this picture. Some of the audience will recognize it. It's this capital city of Germany. It's Berlin, and I'm lucky that the beamer is good enough. You can still see a difference. You can see the Berlin Wall still, at least from the space, because on the left side we have a different lamp temperature than on the right side. So this is an example for innovations that you have to make decisions. Like in this case, another decision for lamp technology is made at the eastern side and on the western side, and it also still has sometimes historic reasons or regulatory reasons behind it. So what we focus with Babel Smart Cities, the company I'm working for in the meantime, is like to accelerate the change for a better urban life and to also provide knowledge and market access for the public and private sector, so to bridge these both sides. And what you can see is we are based in Europe and focused on Europe, but very happy to announce that since like 3 months, we also have a cooperation with Chile, and with the goal to bring our platform technology, I will show you a demo in a second, to also the South American market, to also bridge this gap between what cities think and what companies think and what they need also in South America. This is illustrated here. What was a problem statement for the company as we found it was like that cities have a very inefficient use of funds. So around 80% of the investments don't have a real impact. So on the other side, but there are very strong political goals and a lot of pressure also to cities to apply sustainable technologies. And there is a lack of knowledge, so how to start with smart city projects and climate neutral projects. And on the other side, we have the companies. They have little knowledge about the needs of the cities sometimes, and they need an access to the market and also to the communication. So this leads to inefficient markets from our point of view, and we try to solve it with a very transparent and open communication channel. These are also words already mentioned in the session before, that the communication aspect is very important. So this is what we do, like basically providing information about projects and best practices. In this case, all over Europe, but as mentioned, it will be also hopefully soon similar solution for South America, because we also heard that the solutions are not one-to-one transferable. So we have to take into account regional opportunities and regional circumstances, and this can promote or inhibit specific technologies in the market. So what I want to say here is that there is a huge window of opportunity at the moment, but we still say that smart cities are much more than only focused on the technology and on market trends. So first of all, there is a strong political push for sustainable development goals, and we have strong market push factors, like for smart solutions, for decentralized solutions, and also for new business models. And on the other side, there are pressing urban challenges, they have to be solved, and there is an increasing demand for participation of the citizens as well. They want to decide together with city administration what life quality aspects should be focused on, for example. And this all comes with a huge demand for data availability as well. So on my next slide, you see I'm rushing through a bit because I have many slides, but as you will have, if you are interested, then can have a deeper look into the single slides because they will be provided. Here, this is an example for smart grids. I think smart grids are a very good example for a market push factor because this brings all together, like the requirements for sustainable solutions like renewable energies and also the integration of the fluctuating renewable energies, like Germany is focusing on strongly on photovoltaics and wind because the potential is quite limited for example, hydropower. And this renewable integration comes with the environmental benefit and also with the security aspects like increasing resiliency of the grid, reliability, and also grid efficiency. So this is an example to bringing the field of energy technologies together with the other factors like digitalization trends and also data availability. This was kind of mentioned before, but this is stated more prominent here on this slide. So it's stated that currently only 10 to 20% approximately, depending on the estimations of innovation projects really have an impact in the city. Like an impact means in this case that it's used so that it's really has a benefit. So this is the definition of successful. And the question is like, why is this happening? And this I want to address a bit more in detail and also provide some examples how to solve it. So first, 3 very basic statements. What are the barriers for smart city implementations or also energy technology innovations in this field, as this is a very huge part of a smart city, right? So we have a lack of structured neutral information. What we try to tackle also with this platform, that there is a knowledge about what other cities do, and they can learn from each other and basically don't make the same mistake twice and be more efficient when you apply a similar technology in your city. Then there is a lack of collaboration mechanisms. And from our point of view, there's a lack of tools and supporting services. So the traditional tools and processes are not designed to cope with the complexities of smart city implementations very often. There are huge efforts also in the European Union to solve this, and regulations evolved quickly in the last years. So one goal is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, to bring cities and also companies together so that they speak the same language. And still there is a gap between what cities expect from technology suppliers, and on the other side, there is a difference what technology suppliers need or expect from cities. So from the city side, like there is a need for tailored discussions and clearly articulating what the technology's real value will be in the city when it's applied, and also the need for tailored and open solutions. And on the supply side, the suppliers have to have to handle with the inflexible procurement sometimes, and also don't have a really access to the cities to understand what they really need, and they often lack a strong political leadership or a clear agenda what are the paths they want to go. So one solution is to focus on the procurement process. So very briefly, what can we do to improve this? So there are some leading questions around it. So for a city, for example, what the question is, what state-of-the-art technology is available at the moment and also suitable for my city? What would be the ideal starting point, for example, for digitalization in city services? And what can we learn from past projects, from other projects, from other cities? And where can you find the right suppliers to match with your needs? And one solution for this is a market consultation, like to start that cities first inform from other cities what they did, and have a communication tool like the platform or other options to get in contact with other cities and have an exchange, but also to provide to reaching out to a network of suppliers so that they understand the cities also what they can expect from the market and what they can expect from the suppliers by getting direct feedback. And also have an awareness what maybe is very cost effective or very costly if some specific technology wishes are made to the suppliers. So just improve this better understanding, the mutual understanding. Here's another example for a roadmap development. This is a German city, but we applied it in many cities all over Europe. The goal is to have a long-term strategy. So when you have a target of 2050 to be carbon neutral, it's a long time. But if you just wait, you will not reach your targets, because it's also kind of a system to promise more at a later point. So maybe then as a politician, you are not in charge at this time anymore. So you don't have to care so much what you promise. So this tackles this long-term strategies, tackle exactly this issue that you have to start now to succeed later with your targets. As an example for this German city is, for example, when we have positive energy district as a target for 2050. So this means like an area in the city or the whole city, so you can define it, produces more electricity as you consume in this area. You have to apply the technologies now. For example, you need the right transmission infrastructure. You need also the data infrastructure to have the digitalization grid as well ready. You also might need regulatory developments to succeed this. And then maybe you have single technology steps which lead you at the very end, for example, to the peer-to-peer trading by blockchain technology, and building all of these further development steps you set so as a final target. So this is one approach, and now I have only 2 more slides. So what we see is key enablers for future smart city implementations are, so be outcome focused rather than technology focused, coordinate the technology procurement. It's a requirement to have also flexible smart city financing methods, and long-term strategies and city-specific planning, just as mentioned the slide before. So this is, if you're interested in further, have a market watch, this you can download for free. This is where we investigated very innovative solutions from companies, especially with a European focus. So in the field of smart city. So if you're interested, you can access this. Just want to show this. And then, I hope I could highlight in this short presentation that communication and transparency is needed to find a solution for to find the most suitable technology for a city and also foster the right innovations in a city-specific environment. So in this case, with the communication and transparency, I'm looking forward to the further dialogue and looking forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip. What we had up to now is how to mobilize civil society. And from this time horizon that Philip shared with us, now we will move to academia. We have the privilege to have here with us Professor Roberto Schaffer, who is a full professor of energy economics at the University Federal of Rio de Janeiro. And Dr. Schaffer also collaborates with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He's a member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences, and he will bring to us the work that he has been doing on modeling. So, Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by thanking the FAPESP and also our German colleagues for the invitation. I will try to have a different perspective here. I have a long list of slides here, but I promise I'm going to stick with my time here, so I'm going to have to be fast on some slides. And this presentation here is based on a recent paper we published, which is the outcome of a doctoral dissertation of one of our students, Eduardo Caceres. So basically, I'm borrowing from him a series of slides here. Why the focus here on aviation and shipping? Basically because these are what we used to call hard to abate sectors. And when, let's say, in 2015, some 190 countries have agreed with the Paris Agreement to reduce emissions to a certain level where countries have to stick with their NDCs, basically international aviation and shipping is completely out of the equation, simply because those emissions are not accounted for to any country. So basically, this is something nobody's thinking about. That's why the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, has decided to auto-impose, let's say, targets for the shipping industry. The same applies to IATA, the equivalent in the aviation. They auto-impose targets for them. And basically, in the case of IMO, the target is to get by 2050 with emissions 50% below what were emissions in 2008. Same applies to IATA. So basically what I'm going to try to show here, that it doesn't make sense to have aviation auto-imposing a target, shipping auto-imposing a target, that eventually those targets may conflict even with targets from different countries. Why? One way to reduce shipping emissions is basically to stop international trade. And by doing that, we may begin to produce some goods in some countries, leading to much higher emissions at the country level to please let's say, an agreement with respect to shipping emissions. The same applies to aviation. So basically what I'm going to be showing here very fast, let's say, what does it mean for the profile of fuels to be used by shipping if shipping wants to achieve its target? The same, what will be the profile of fuels for aviation if aviation wants to meet its target? And how would be the profile of fuels for shipping in aviation if Brazil wants to meet its target of staying well below 2 degrees? And these are completely three worlds, and I'm going to be showing that. Okay, very briefly, so what I'm trying to stress here is that there are some low-hanging fruits, and somehow I think we discussed the low-hanging fruit this morning. Let's say, it's not easy to decarbonize light-duty vehicles. We can electrify, we can use biofuels. This is not the real issue here. It's not the difficult, let's say, to change fuels in the power sector. The problem here really is what we call hard-to-abate sectors. Are those sectors that it's not that easy to decarbonize. Why? Let's take the case of aviation. The average, let's say, lifetime of an airplane is roughly 30 years. The average age of the fleet today in the world is below 10 years. The average lifetime of a ship is around 40 years. The average age of ships today is below 15 years. and we need to go to net zero, something like that, in 27 years. We're not going to throw away all the airplanes we have. We're not going to throw away all the ships we have. We're not going to use ammonia. We're not going to use hydrogen. You cannot use those fuels in the existing fleet. And you only have 27 years to do the job. And that's why drop-in fuels are really the answer for that. And I'm going to focus specific on that. Okay. Very briefly, let's say we have many possibilities here. Let's say electricity is a possibility. Hydrogen, as was discussed this morning, is a possibility. We have, let's say, the possibility of capturing CO2 to produce, let's say, synthetic fuels. So many possibilities. But what are the real options we have for aviation and shipping? Let's look at aviation and shipping. Basically today, the alternatives we have for aviation fuels are, or what things that have been discussed, are basically here, let's say, low carbon hydrogen, and eventually renewable liquefied natural gas, or a kind of kerosene-like based on renewable fuels. In the case of shipping, we have much more options here, and I'm not going to discuss all options here, but the options are great. But what about hydrogen and liquefied gas for aviation? I'm not going to have time to discuss here, but basically, the energy density of hydrogen is so low that I show here that you cannot fly an airplane on hydrogen. You see that, let's say, in a long flight with hydrogen, you're going to use most of the load the plane can carry just to carry fuel. So it's impossible to fly a long-haul airplane using hydrogen simply because you cannot carry that load, you don't have space for that. The same applies to, let's say, compressed natural gas. So forget it. So if we forget that, basically, what is left for the current technology, for the current fleet, is basically to use kerosene-like renewable fuel. So this is, I think, an important lesson for us to learn. What about, okay, so what we have done? Basically, we have shown, let's say, all the possibilities to produce those kind of renewable fuels. There are many possibilities here. I'm not going to discuss here. We can use algae. You can use, let's say, corn, sugar cane, many possibilities here. And basically, you have, let's say, this kind of fuels that can be used for aviation based on biofuels. EFA fuels, which is a synthetic paraffin. You can have alcohol to jet. So we have many possibilities here. You can have biomass to liquids using the Fischer-Tropsch route. So many possibilities here. Okay, I'm not going to discuss all of them because I don't have time. So basically, let me go back once here. How do I go do that? So basically, this is the possibility we have for the case of aviation. What about shipping? Shipping, we have many possibilities here. We have distilled biofuels, we have alcohols, we have hydrogen-based fuels. How to decide what are the best alternatives to do that? So basically what we have to do, we have to look at what's the availability of those fuels, what's the energy density, what are the standards if they exist or not, what's the applicability, technological maturity, safety issues, local sustainability issues, global sustainability issues, and economics, etc., etc. When we do that, from the economics point of view, we can very clearly see here, let's say that the least cost as compared to average bunker fuels today is biomethanol is the least cost solution, then biodiesel, etc. So basically, you can rank all the shipping fuels by cost. But we can also look at, let's say, energy density as a criteria. We can also look at operational safety as a criteria. And basically, I'm not going to have time here. And we have done that. We have looked at all possible technological options for shipping and look at all the strengths, all the weaknesses to see, let's say, which will be the best alternative for shipping. If it's straight vegetable oil, if it's biodiesel, if it's hydrotreated vegetable oil, if it's hydrotreated pyrolysis oil, if it's Fischer-Tropsch diesel. We have looked at all of this, and then based on that, we have come up with a conclusion. What's the conclusion that we have come up here? Just one moment, because, okay. So we have to put, let's say, it's a kind of multi-criteria analysis. So you have to put weights on the different, let's say, possibilities here to see what's the best solution for shipping. And basically, according to our analysis, the best solution in terms of scoring is Fischer-Tropsch diesel. The second best is hydrotreated vegetable oil, et cetera. And the last solution, the worst one, is green hydrogen. Okay. This is if you look only at aviation, if you look only at shipping. What about if you put all the pieces together? Because you cannot produce jet fuel by itself. You have to have a refinery where you also produce or co-produce diesel, gasoline, many other things. So you cannot simply decide, I'm going to, let's say, begin to use ethanol and export excess gasoline. If no one's going to buy that gasoline because you have some, let's say, your structure of the refinery sector is very complex. So basically what I have here, we have decided to integrate, to put all the pieces together to see how does it work. And in order to do that, we have used one integrated assessment model that we have developed here in Brazil, the BLUES model, which looks at the energy system, which looks at the land use system, water consumption, air pollution. We are beginning to introduce biodiversity into it to see what's the, let's say, a kind of integrated perspective for the Brazilian economy, what's the implication of this for aviation and for shipping. So these are all the technological routes that are represented in our model. I don't have time to discuss that. We can have the possibility of co-processing biomass in existing refineries, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now the most important part here. I'm going to explore different scenarios here. I'm going to explore one scenario where I want to meet the IATA target of reducing emissions for aviation. This is the IATA scenario. Then I'm going to now just look at the IMO scenario. I want to meet the IMO scenario, which is to reduce emissions from shipping 50% in 2050 as compared to 2080. Then I'm going to have a fourth scenario, which now I want to meet both IATA and IMO. And now I'm going to forget IATA and IMO and just want to meet the Brazilian, let's say, compromise of becoming net zero GHG by 2050 and see the implication of that for aviation and for shipping. Okay, as expected, let's say, what would be the international aviation from CO2 emissions in Brazil from international aviation if I'm only concerned with IMO, let's say. So basically, because it's the other way around. So basically, I see that if I'm only concerned with IMO target, which is the red line, of course, international aviation emissions will go up because my concern is shipping, not aviation. So if I'm concerned with shipping, aviation emissions will go up. So I can meet, let's say, IMO targets, but basically not fulfill the IATA commitment. The same applies the other way around. What would be the implications for international shipping emissions if I'm only concerned with IATA targets? So basically, emissions from shipping will go up because my concern is aviation, not shipping. Just to show that we have to have, let's say, an integrated approach and not focus specifically on issue only. And now, what about, let's say, if my concern is Brazil? So what are the implications of emissions in Brazil if I meet IATA emissions or targets, IMO targets, IATA IMO, emissions of Brazil will go up. And if I'm concerned with Brazil, of course, the green line, emissions of Brazil will go up. Okay, here is the interesting part. Here, basically, I see what will be the profile of fuels in aviation if I'm concerned with IATA. Then basically, my model says, no, if you want to meet the IATA targets with a least cost, you're supposed to use biokerosene. You use biokerosene from the BTL route, which is the light green here. If I'm concerned with IMO only, basically, my model says, okay, you can continue to use fossil fuels in aviation because your concern is IMO, is not aviation, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I see if my concern is Brazil to meet its target, which is the compromise Brazil had before the Paris Agreement, basically the profile of aviation fuels have nothing to do with the profile of aviation fuels if I only look at aviation. Same applies to shipping fuels. You see that there are different, let's say, possibilities for shipping fuels if I want to meet, let's say, the IMO target, IATA target, IMO IATA. But if I want to meet Brazilian targets, the profile of the shipping fuels in Brazil will be completely different. Why? Because basically, in order to meet, let's say, transportation demand in Brazil, power sector demand in Brazil, industry, I have to have a profile of the energy system that by definition will produce some fuels which will be useful for aviation and shipping, because I cannot produce kerosene. If I produce kerosene for aviation as a co-product, I have bunker fuel, I have diesel, I have gasoline, because I cannot produce one product only. So this, I think, the important conclusion here. You cannot look at one sector independently of the other. You cannot look at, let's say, urban mobility and think about ethanol without thinking about diesel, without thinking about kerosene, without thinking about, let's say, plastics, without thinking about fertilizers. The energy system is integrated. You cannot think about one sector by itself because the energy system is fully integrated. So basically, I have to finish now. My time is almost gone. So basically what I'm trying to show here is that there is a synergy between different sectors of the economy. And because aviation fuels are the most let's say, specified fuel you can find, if you meet the aviation fuel specificity, by definition, you produce bunker fuel. By definition, you produce diesel. By definition, you produce other fuels for the Brazilian economy. So my concluding remarks here is basically fuel switch is key, of course, for reducing emissions in aviation and shipping. But as of today, because of the existing fleet of airplanes and ships, you have to think about drop-in biofuels as a way to have, let's say, the current fleet flying. Because again, we have to be something around net zero in less than 30 years. You are not going to scrap the existing airplanes we have. We are not going to scrap the existing ships you have. You have to find a solution, and the best solution is drop-in fuels, and based on our analysis here, because of cost, availability, basically biofuels, drop-in biofuels is the real solution. That's why I did not want to raise this in the morning. I don't think that the future of biofuels is for light-duty vehicles. Light-duty vehicles have alternatives. Airplanes do not have alternatives. Shipping does not have alternatives. So you have to concentrate our efforts in those sectors that cannot be easily electrified. Almost coming to an end here. So basically, let's say I have indicated we have different possibilities here, but the important thing here, and why our model chooses so much biofuels, is not because exactly we want net zero emissions from the energy sector, because we have the possibility of having negative emissions coming out of the energy sector, and negative emissions can only be produced if you have biofuels with carbon capture and storage, basically BECCS. And basically in the Brazilian economy, this does make a big difference because you are not going to be able to decarbonize all sectors of the economy. You cannot decarbonize agriculture. You're going to have methane emissions in there. You're going to have N2O emissions in there. So some sectors will continue to be positive in terms of emissions, and some sectors you have to be negative. If you have green hydrogen, you are not net negative. You are at most zero. And we need to be more than zero because some sectors will never be decarbonized. So, final word here, you have to have an integrated approach to the energy system. It's not enough to look at mobility, industry, residential sector, because in the end, let's say, it doesn't fit well. You have to look at the entire system and see what's the best solution for the entire system, which may lead to suboptimal solutions for individual sectors of the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. What Robert brought to us, this long-term perspective that is the identity of academia, reminding us the complexity of decision makers and the need of cross-analysis for long-term commitment that sectors or countries have been announcing. So this is, we want to congratulate your doctoral student, but you are the co-author as mentor of this thesis. So congratulations to both of you. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move to another time horizon, which is industry. And definitely is much shorter. There is shareholders, there are expectations from stakeholders. It's a different time horizon, different interests, different values. And we will begin with Fernando Junior, who has been working for 20 years with R&D, 17 of them in the automotive business at Robert Bosch. And currently, Fernando Junior is leading the powertrain solution system development at Robert Bosch Latin America. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Professor. So thank you very much for the invitation as well. I'm very proud and happy to be here with you today. Thank you for your time. I'd like to congratulate the colleagues that already presented very high level. I'm learning a lot today, and I hope you can take also something out of my presentation as well. So I'd like, first of all, to give you a global perspective of Bosch view, Bosch vision, in terms of innovation and renewable energy challenges. So it was already spoken today in the morning, yeah, but here we have a panorama of the world is changing, and I will tackle today just the topic energy supply and transition, but we have other issues as spoken that we have to combine to find the future solutions. Another important information, yeah, at Bosch, we are CO2 neutral since 2020. So for sure, still with some golden certificates has to be purchased, but we also have very strictly targets until 2030 to reduce, to minimize the certificates as well. And we have a very strong target for Scope 3, yeah, the usage of our products up to 15% in 2030. It's also very important to mention, it was already highlighted in the presentations in the morning, we do believe that we have complementary solutions. First of all, we have in the upper side the efficiency path. For sure, electrification is very important. So the more we have electrified component systems, subsystems, and also the complete powertrain, we reach more efficient, and this is very important for decarbonization. But we also have the below path. We call it energy path. So we still have to strive for alternative, both bio and synthetic fuels for the future, as we have seen in the other presentations. Main important message that is being highlighted here the whole day, it must be renewable energy. Yeah, sustainability for Bosch, yeah, we like the term ESG, but we prefer to combine it with the triangle of sustainability that it has to do with economic, social, and also environment. So it's not only environmental target. And this is one example for electrification. So Bosch is investing since years in electrification in silicon carbide components to improve efficiency in electrified components, subsystem systems, and also the powertrain. But there's also one reason, yeah, because electrification is also important for social and economy of such countries. Yeah, here we have a short map. If we find it up to date, the targets are even higher. Yeah, so we have governments subventioning electrification because this is important also for the infrastructure, for the associates, for the salary, for the economics in place. So for Bosch as well, it's very important, not only because of CO2 reduction and high efficiency, but because it's also important for each region and each government. And last but not least, from the global perspective, so Bosch is also since years investing in the green hydrogen infrastructure. So we are in the complete life cycle in the whole chain from green hydrogen production, storage, distribution, and usage, not only for mobility, but also for house appliance in the industry. So this is a very important topic for us. Not only because of Europe, but we see, as we saw it today in the morning, so Argentina, Brazil, and Chile have a huge potential for green hydrogen production for local usage, but also to be used in other countries. And yeah, then coming to our regional perspective, yeah, I think this is very interesting what we are doing today. What is our core innovations, what we are focusing on. So first of all, I'd like to bring you, it was mentioned, so anytime we talk about ethanol, and just to bring you some, very briefly, this historical. So ethanol was in first place energy security for Brazil. Then due to the flex fuel, it became flexibility. And nowadays it's very important lever for the running fleet. And I'd like to remind you that this innovation, it existed in the US in the 80s, yeah, but they didn't get along because it was very expensive to have an ethanol sensor in the flex, so-called flex fuel vehicle. And then at Bosch, here in Brazil, Plant Campinas, 1993, we developed the first flex fuel concept car, and it was based on what that time was very new for mobility. So it has not more than 5 years. So software development, so software engine control, and we could use the existing sensors like the oxygen sensor to identify the mixture. So this was a very important moment for our automotive industry. In Brazil, in first place, it was a niche development, as was spoken today in the morning. Yeah, we start innovation from a niche perspective and then intending to scale afterwards. And in 2023, this year, we are celebrating 30 years of the concept car created by Bosch, and also 20 years of market introduction in 2003. It took 10 years of discussions with producers, with the government, so to take it into a reality. And today, we see that this niche development is now reaching other countries like India that will move slowly to flex fuel. Passenger car running fleet for the future is also an important target for India, and also other countries increasing more and more the amount of ethanol mixed in the gasoline. But talking about innovation, so what is our main motivation? What is our primary focus? I'd like to start from left to right. For sure, most of the topics were tackled today, but I would like to say that even for internal combustion engine, yeah, as it was mentioned before, we have a strong focus into keep further developing advanced diesel powertrain. Yeah, and why is that? Because as mentioned before, we will not get rid of diesel so soon, yeah, because it's due to its power density, due to infrastructure, and the diesel powertrain is a bridge to biodiesel and HVO, as it was explained. So we see a future where the biodiesel content goes to a certain extent, but in the future, when the TCO will improve for HVO, for sure it will be very beneficial for sustainability if we could introduce HVO as well in the diesel mixture. Also in terms of flex fuel powertrain, when you call to auto engines, it was a lot of spoken about CO2, but we have a lot of challenges for pollutant emissions. Yeah, we know that internal combustion engines also bring this challenge, and we need to further evolve that. Otherwise, we are not able to slowly transform, slowly move our energy industry into a decarbonized level. Gas powertrain as well important, yeah, because the gas powertrain is a bridge to the usage of biomethane and in the future also H2 engine, yeah, for hydrogen. So we have more or less the same system, same components evolving. And it's very important for us, if we keep striving for the state of art in such powertrain, that we can prepare for the future. So meanwhile, we don't have enough infrastructure worldwide for hydrogen. It's being built up quickly in other countries. In Brazil, we see it's lower, but nevertheless, it will be for sure a very important path for us as well. In the middle, starting from upwards, yeah, hybridization. It's a very promising combination. If you can combine the biofuel with improvement of efficiency from 5 to 30%, this is a good lever, yeah, to step by step improving the decarbonization in the mobility industry. In the middle, we have the bioenergy. Yeah, I'd like to call it bioenergy because, and the arrows shows that they can reflect in the most of other powertrains. As I mentioned before, mixed. It was mentioned today in the morning that maybe biofuels are a transition. I do believe that for some countries, for sure, it's a transition, but for Brazil, it's not the transition. Yeah, it's for sure a long-term solution. Yeah, and we have really to identify where, as was spoken today as well, the renewable energy matrix, the primary energy matrix, is a very important lever to show us which direction each country or each region should further evolve. Synthetic fuels, for sure, in the North Hemisphere mainly, yeah, where we don't have enough space or the climate conditions are not the best to produce ethanol out of sugarcane or even to produce other biofuels. Syntheticals are really a solution. Yeah, and it's important to mention that Bosch is also cooperating, working with other synthetic fuel producers, and we see also a path for synthetic. It's not a switch 0 to 100, but we have evolution of synthetic fuels, and biofuels are also part of that. We have mixed biofuels in the synthetic fuels as well, while we don't have such maturity or the total costs for the synthetics are not in place. And on the right-hand side, not less important, we have the battery electric vehicle for sure, very important for some applications for last mile. Also in terms of pollutant emissions, fuel cell is something very interesting, very promising, still challenging and complex, not only in the powertrain, but also in the infrastructure, as mentioned before, and the E2 engines for commercial vehicles for long distance, for sure, very promising technology to be touched. Yeah, it was mentioned before, but I'd like to highlight that for ethanol, the life cycle, it's for sure important. The colleague from Volkswagen, Roger Guilherme, mentioned, yeah, this is from Cocal. They have this example of around 20 grams of CO2 per megajoule, very less than gasoline. And it's important also to mention that these bioproducers, these biofactories or bioenergy factories, they are more and more replacing diesel and fertilizers by biomethane and biofertilizers. And this helps a lot to bring the CO2 to even negative levels, like Professor mentioned. We need to think negative in order to reach the neutrality of greenhouse gases. This is just also an information. It was shown life cycle. Well to wheel, it's around 80% of life cycle, depending on the requirements. Here it's important to mention that the CO2 footprint of a flex fuel running with ethanol in Brazil today is the same of an electric car in Europe. So this data is from 2020. Both are going down, both footprint of ethanol and electricity worldwide. But it's important to mention that we have a running fleet of 32 million vehicles. Yeah, and this is a direct level of decarbonization. But it's not done. So the colleague has shown in terms of energy. I'm showing here in terms of choice, in terms of volume. This is the average of the last years. We have less than 50% of the users choosing ethanol for many reasons we can discuss in the debate. But what we have is innovation for that, combining with connectivity. Yeah, we have a similar solution to what the colleague mentioned, even going further to calculating what is the carbon footprint if you have ethanol or any mixture in comparison with the worst case. We call it CO2 tracking, and this can help people to be more conscious, to know how many trees they will save, fleet owners to officially provide the values for their fleets, and also, as mentioned before, to use it as gamification, also to bring people more in the direction of biofuels usage in Brazil. It can be used in other countries as well. There are countries where we have HVO and diesel available. Why we don't use that to improve or to increase the HVO usage, for example, in Sweden? And then the last innovation, just an overview about that, it was mentioned already. We are also working on what we call bioelectrification, where we take the ethanol, mix it with water, and in the end we have it transformed into energy by a biofuel cell. Yeah, for sure. This is just the beginning. We are some years already with partners, with universities in Brazil, and other partners as well as car makers as well. And it's important to mention that this is the best of both worlds. Yeah, we can, within technology, that's not for sure for serious production before 2030, but we have to start right now. And we do believe in that because we can combine several positive perspectives. We have the bioenergy as renewable energy. We have a high efficiency powertrain available or under development worldwide. We have less storage issues because, as you may know, hydrogen also has some security, some safety issues in terms of production, transportation, storage, and the infrastructure is available. Today, only in Brazil, but we know that India is moving, shifting to flex fuel as well. And we have methanol as also a very important topic for China. So this could be the next flex fuel, the third wave for the upcoming years, and we do believe on that. And the motivation is, I have shown to you these two curves, efficiency and renewable energy. The ethanol fuel cell is in the middle. It used the best of both worlds, as I have mentioned. For ICE, we still have the local pollutant challenge. Yeah, we may not forget that. So we do believe somewhere in the future, also the legislation will come very strictly, and we need to have alternatives for that. Thank you. And last but not least, we see that also in terms of ICE, yeah, since the world is more or less changing and moving towards the electrification, we have to be careful with the electronic architecture. So the car will change a lot from inside, and somewhere in the future, in 2035, 2040, who knows, maybe the ICE won't be so fancy because mostly of the developments will be focusing on battery electric cars. So this is something to reflect. And my last message for you, it was already mentioned today, so I'm very happy that we are aligned with many speakers. So country needs to collaborate. Does make sense for sure. It's good to have a role modeling of legislation, of pushing to decarbonization, but we need to collaborate and use the best of each country. So Brazil should be, maybe in the future, to become a must that we become CO2 negative even before 2050, so that we can compensate other countries. This should be a combined work. Second topic, there is no golden solution. There is no winning technology. We need to tackle each segment with usage and mainly with renewable energy. And last but not least, we support the powertrain mix or the energy mix as well, exploring also new technologies like connectivity, automation, and electrified innovations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fernando. What Fernando brought to us is this vision of mobility, considering a Brazilian specificity. And to understand it, we have to look at demography, and also we have to look at public policies. In 1970, just 50 years ago, Brazilian population were 90 million. Today we are more than 200 million in 50 years. So we incorporated something like 110 million or more inhabitants in 5 decades. So when we compare countries with relative stability in demography, or even that they are bringing migrations from other countries, we have to understand that we are still not in a stable or foreseeable demographic evolution. And the reason why I mention this is because on one side we see Germany with a lot of very proactive policy for green mobility, financing including families and people with a very low cost mobility in cities and intercity, which is not the case of Brazil. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, before giving the floor to our next speaker, to Paulo Roberto, is why we are speaking so much about cars. When we heard from Samuel saying there is a young generation that even don't want a driver license or they don't buy cars. So we have such a different reality among the two countries, and a dialogue like this one helps us to develop empathy. This means understanding the other in his own specificity. So I want to thank, first of all, Fernando Jr. to bring this specificity, including Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. And now, giving the floor to Paulo Roberto Antunes de Souza Jr. from Siemens, who has joined Siemens since 2007. He is currently responsible for the electric mobility business unit at Siemens, with the mission to deliver solutions for charging electric vehicles to customers. The floor is yours.
Okay, now it's working. So good afternoon from my side. It's a pleasure to be here, very privileged. So appreciate the invitation from the organization to represent Siemens for such audience that we have here today. Thank you, Professor Jacques, for the coordination previously to the presentation. Was very interesting and collaborated for the speakers to bring something relevant for the audience. So starting with about Siemens, and why we are doing that here. So most of the colleagues from Germany probably know Siemens quite a lot. So Siemens is delivering technology with purpose. We have been acting in different industries. And in Brazil, the focus is also to collaborate with the decarbonization. We are present, for instance, in the production of second generation of ethanol with Raízen. And we are also present with charge infrastructure for trucks, buses, and light vehicles. I don't want to put much pressure on the discussion, ethanol, EVs, etc. I think that was very well discussed among the speakers today. What I want to bring and to show to the audience today is how Siemens is working to make EV more easier to charge and similar to internal combustion engine. So our mission is to deliver to the customers something that is easy as stopping a few minutes in a gas station, filling the car with gasoline or ethanol, and continue your journey. We have been working with several partners to develop different technologies to make that possible. Some of this technology are already in operation in Brazil, right? It's challenging to drive an EV car in Brazil. I drive an EV for a couple of months, and I must be honest to myself, that's still complicated to trace my routes. I need to plan quite well in advance where I'm going, where I'm stopping. Several times I found myself with 5% battery in my car, stopping nearby a fast charger, praying for the charger to be in operation. Otherwise, I will have no other option to go home. So it's kind of investment Brazil is still lacking. It was already presented by the other colleagues in this morning that no incentive from government to invest in charging infrastructure. My colleague from Volkswagen, Roger Guilherme, shown that why is still a challenge for Brazil to move with electric cars. And we have been working with partners to adopt chargers on the street. And the financials, I must confess, is complicated, right? Without government investments, fast charger in Brazil won't return the investment within the next 5, 6, 7 years. So it's not like companies are installing chargers in Brazil to profit from that, but rather they also understand is one of the possible paths for the future, and they make the investment because they believe in this path, not because financially speaking it's for the company. There are other reasons behind this investment. But let me speak a little bit about Siemens before stepping deeply into the charge infrastructure and what we are doing globally. So Siemens is a very focused technology company. We have been working worldwide for 175 years. So I'm very proud to work for such a company that was able to reinvent itself several times over this long period of time. We are in Brazil for more than 150 years. We started in Brazil with the telegraph line from Rio de Janeiro to south part of Brazil. And then we established ourselves here, always delivering to the society technology that make the difference. So we are involved. I am coming from the electrical sector. I've been working for 15 years with generation, transmission, distribution. So I know the type of projects Siemens has done in Brazil for generation, transmission, distribution. And I'm pretty sure we have delivered things that matter for society here locally, despite of global presence. We have worldwide 311,000 employees working in different regions with really relevant revenue, as you can see there, and in net income. But beside numbers, I think the purpose and the mission of the company is that is the most relevant for me, and why that's one of the reasons I decided to join Siemens 70 years ago. You know, when I see the benefit and the difference we can do in the daily lives. I know we are doing that for a long time, and that's why the reason we are here for such a long period of time also. And in Brazil, I'm in charge for the electrical mobility business unit. So I anticipate a little bit the mission of this business unit. We are working hard to make possible the adoption of electrical vehicles by people in general. So beside all the topics related to the costs, batteries, autonomy of the vehicle, etc., there's a cultural aspect that we need to change. You know, people is very used to stop just a few minutes in a gas station, and then you won't think about putting fuel in your car again for the next 500, 600 kilometers. And not really what's going on now for electrical vehicles. It's a little bit different, and we need to understand that any other new technology, it will evolve until it reaches a very high level of maturity, was mentioned already by Professor Jacks, the S-curve. So we still ramping the S-curve, still some investment needed until the maturity of both charging stations and electrical vehicle cars are in a level that is really 100% comparable in terms of autonomy and adoption by the people when we compare to ICE. And that's the mission. So we are investing deeply in fast chargers capable to deliver as much as energy as possible within a couple of minutes. Nowadays, we have chargers that can fulfill a battery from 20% up to 80% in almost 15-20 minutes, which is something that's somehow acceptable when you're driving your car in long distance and you need to stop to go to the toilet, to eat something for 15-20 minutes, and you gain more 300-400 kilometers in just 20 minutes, which, well, makes a lot of sense if you plan that in advance. We also focusing in different new technologies to bring e-mobility in general for people and make it not only affordable, but convenient. I think that's the word I was missing in the beginning. Convenience is something that can unlock a little bit more the potential of electrical cars among the users, right? I know the new generations are paying a lot of attention for decarbonization. I was just using ethanol before I had the electrical car in my home. I know some colleagues that are only filling the car with ethanol. The new generation has this approach, but the generation doesn't represent the majority of the people living in planet at this moment. So we really need to push convenience among the sector on the charging infrastructure and also the electrical car to make the adoption faster when it's relevant, right? And I understand that Europe, United States, Brazil Siemens put a lot of effort to include our charging infrastructure on the street, and mainly because we are lacking of ethanol and other alternatives as we have here. So going a little bit into the portfolio, so there are different possibilities to charge a vehicle, and the technology is pretty much related to the time you have available for charging your vehicle. So we have small chargers, mainly intended to be used by home users or shopping malls, retails, these kind of things. So we have this very powerful charger that up to now is delivering 200 kilowatts of power, and with this equipment we can charge a vehicle from 20 to 80% in almost 20 minutes. We are also very committed with utility vehicles, so trucks and buses, mainly because already in Brazil, the use case for this type of vehicle makes sense in the financials when you look at long term, and long term, when I say long term, I mean 80, 10 years, we can find some break even comparing that with diesel. So there is break even with EVs for trucks and buses, and we have all the decarbonization and the sustainability top behind that, pushing it across the city. So I hope that in São Paulo, you'll be able to commit the target to deliver 2,000 buses until the end of next year. That will be a very big step for Brazil in terms of public transportation. We are paying a good attention on that, and we hope we will collaborate with the depots that want to move forward with e-buses. But I want to talk a little bit now about what's coming next, and also what's behind EVs and what I call the secret behind the electrical vehicles. That's the bidirectional charging. So, as I mentioned, we are trying to make that as convenient as possible. So we are working with wireless charging. For me, wireless charging will be a key element to speed up the adoption of electrical vehicles by users, because it's so convenient with your cell phone. Imagine with your car, you just park over the wireless charger and you go do what you need to do, and you come back, your car was charged. So no interaction, no dealing with plugs, cables, these kind of things. That's really, really another level of convenience, and we have several prototypes run in different parts of the globe, and I'm pretty sure that will make quite easier the process to charge a vehicle. Also, the mega charging for long-haul trucks. We see observing in Europe the adoption of long-haul vehicles, e-trucks that can transport 30 tons, 40 tons of goods in 200 kilometers, 400 kilometers, and so on. So that's gaining more momentum now, and are committed to deliver solutions that can charge such big batteries with 1 megawatt of power. That could also demand autonomous fast charging when it comes to autonomous trucks and autonomous car. Nobody is there to connect the plug, so we need that to happen automatically. And finally, but not the least, the vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. So for me, working 15 years in the electrical sector is a really disruption when you enable people to sell energy to the grid using their own car. You know? That's a game changer for utilities, for DSOs. I think is also enable for how we store green energy in different aspects. We cannot generate green energy, renewable energy, any time of the day. We have solar panels in Brazil quite a lot, but we depend on the solar, on the sun to make the generation flow into the grid. So having an important fleet of e-cars, we can store this energy when it's generated to using different moments when you could depend on the non-renewable sources. And that's also something that can facilitate the decarbonization in the electrical sector. It's not well shared and discussed still in Brazil. It's a discussion that's alive in Europe and United States. Some cases are being tested there, and I'm quite a fan of this technology because it will change the way we deal with electrical energy in our home as conventional users of electricity. And I see that from the worldwide perspective. I don't want to step too much on that. That was very well presented by other speakers, but we do have a very renewable electric metrics in Brazil. Last year was checking the numbers, and the energy coming from renewable sources was around 87, 88%, which make us one of the best places in the world for electrical mobility. If we didn't have ethanol, we would be very well positioned also to bring EVs to Brazil and make it happen. So my message here, I bring some data from the EPE, from the Master Consulting Group, numbers that were quite similar to the others presented by speakers, also in the session, the previous one. But basically, the ethanol car in Brazil generates similar CO2 than an EV in Europe, but an EV in Brazil generates less CO2 than an ethanol vehicle in Brazil, mainly if you look well to wheel. And we have different paths. I think that Brazil could lead this decarbonization because we have more powerful tools than other countries, and we certainly, with the right strategy, we can benefit from just two different technologies available in our country. I think that I don't want to go over my time, so thanks again, and I'll be here to discuss these topics with the other colleagues.
Thank you so much, Paulo Roberto. We have 30 minutes now for the panel discussion. The question will come from the floor, but also they can come through the panelists, because the presentation in some way they were integrated in a sense that we had the civil society mobilization, then academia, and then to industry coming from Bosch and Siemens. So you should feel free also to eventually bring your question for the discussion. But first of all, looking at the audience, any question from the audience? Yes, first question. And then if you have...
So Daniela Toya from DBH. Thank you very much for all the presentations. I have the same questions to the colleague from Bosch, specifically about the engines. So how did you solve the initial problems there was with bioethanol, for instance? So this is one thing. And the other thing is, as I heard, Bosch has a lot of in-house research. And you also mentioned that you are collaborating with universities. I just wanted you to tell a little bit more about this, how you do it, and what's the importance to push all of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Fernando? Yes, please.
Thank you for the question, Daniela. So just to be sure, the first question wasn't related to flex fuel in the past. Okay, thank you. So since we had pure ethanol vehicles in the 80s, so we got to use it to develop stronger components, so more robust components, which were in touch with ethanol. So this was the challenge of that decade, and we have evolved that in the upcoming decades. So nowadays, products from Bosch worldwide, we use similar technology from our previous ethanol components. So we have developed here this know-how. And the second step, as I briefly mentioned, was the software intervention. So we have this idea, instead of using expensive, at that time, still a little bit expensive ethanol sensor, we could solve one of the problems that was how to identify when the mixture had changed. Yeah? So nowadays, we don't have to do anything, it's automatically. So for all flex fuel vehicles, if we have any mixture in between, so the software strategy can identify it. It's improving. It has improved a lot in the last years. And regarding to partnerships, it's also directly connected to my final slide. There are some technologies that are in the beginning are seen as niche technologies, as the flex fuel was in the 90s. So we had at that time one funded project where our colleagues from the headquarters gave us some small budget and said, you can do anything you want. At that time, it was in the beginning of 90s, and then the flex fuel was born. And nowadays is pretty the same, similar. But now we see a more connected world, so we are working with partners. And when you talk about bioelectrification, this is a very initial topic. And so it's very important for us to collaborate, not only between companies, university, but also among countries, because we have solutions coming out of, for example, the hydrogen fuel cell that could be used also for a biofuel cell. So in our DNA, it must be the collaboration. We should openly talk and discuss, define consortiums, define straight lines, so that all the industry and together with the academy can evolve And in the end, for sure, when we are ahead of a technological readiness level after 7 or 8, for sure, we will have specific components, specific systems. But until then, if you want to be fast, if you want to tackle the carbon neutrality, we must collaborate.
Yeah. Professor.
First here and then here.
Okay, I will be very short. So I have two questions. One, again to Fernando, and the other to Roberto. So this is I'm not a researcher, but I read a lot the news and some reports, and talk to many researchers from academy and companies. About the use then also from bioethanol to produce green hydrogen and for cars. And so two solutions that I know that were developing or precision is, so one is the use of ethanol in the car to produce hydrogen in the car. And other one is to use ethanol to produce hydrogen in the gas station. These two solutions. So I wanted to comment how it aged of this research. And to Robert, so unfortunately we don't have, I think, someone here from GIZ. Do you know GIZ? The project ProCare for aviation fuel, decarbonization of aviation fuel with decentralized produced kerosene with renewable energies. If you know this project, I don't know, and if you know, if you can comment what you think about that.
And then Roberto.
So starting with the topic production stationary or from mobile, so embedded, both are very interesting. Yeah, as for sure we have companies investigating since more than 7 years. Now we have a research worldwide. The first option, so the stationary hydrogen production, as in our perspective, is very interesting because we have already the infrastructure, and we may have also in India and other countries the ethanol infrastructure available, and this will enable that companies can bring the fuel cell powertrain based on hydrogen to these countries which have this infrastructure. So it's really interesting to see that this could evolve, so that we could have quicker such fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell applications in place. Yeah? On the other hand, they have, for sure, other challenges, like it's not so cheap. Maybe it's a little bit cheaper than to have a tank station for pure green hydrogen, but there's also issues related to safety, to storage, to materials. Yeah, so this is for both cases. And talking about the mobile application, where we have the conversion in the vehicle, the positive aspects are we don't have hydrogen storage, so at least it's not foreseen that we need to have we need to pressurize to store something with the hydrogen. We can have the battery as a buffer, a small battery. On the other hand, the challenge, positive is also the infrastructure, as I mentioned before. And on the other hand, there are several challenges in regard to material, in regarding to the purity of the hydrogen that is generated, the size of the solutions, so they must be embedded. So both paths have interesting challenges to be overcome, and also very positive aspects.
Yes, very, very briefly, I'm not aware of this project, okay? But just very briefly to comment, let's say, a lot of research is being done with respect to different, let's say, routes for biokerosene. The ATJ route, which is alcohol to jet, or the EFA route. So this is pretty mature already. The issue here is cost, it's much more expensive, of course, and an issue of certification. As of today, let's say airplanes or commercial airplanes are already allowed to travel or to fly with up to 50% biokerosene, not 100% yet. So it's just a question of time of certification. In Brazil, Embraer has flight already with Biojet, Boeing, also Airbus. So it's just a question of time and price if people want to pay for that.
Oh, yes, thank you. I'm Ricardo Rutter. I'm a professor of solar energy at the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Florianópolis in the south of Brazil. I have a somewhat long preamble, and then I come to the question to Paulo Roberto. Brazil is a country of contrasts. There is many Brazils inside Brazil. Only about 20% of the people in Brazil live in multi-family dwellings. Most of the people live in houses, and they will be able to charge their electric vehicles at home most of the times. Vehicle to grid will be important. I do this exercise with my students. Do you have any idea of what is the power when you put a filling thing there in your car for petrol, for gasoline? It's from 5 to 8 megawatts. It is as if you were plugging your car to a 5 to 8 megawatts socket, okay, when you fill it up with gasoline. So the question to Paulo Roberto is, don't you think that most of the chargers will be slow chargers? And for heavy-duty vehicles and for long-distance travel is that you will need the infrastructure required for fast chargers. And in that case, you have another problem, which is the electrical system infrastructure, which is even worse a problem than developing the high-power 300 kilowatt, 600 kilowatt fast chargers. And then when you reach a charger and you hope that it is working and there is nobody there before you, then is that you have all these issues involved. So I would like you to comment on all this. Thank you.
Hello? Oh, now it's working. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, indeed, we believe that 7 to 8 EV car owners will charge the vehicle during the night at home. So we're really talking about slow chargers, AC chargers, basically. That could also be bidirectional, you know. Even though, I mean, someone asked me, how do I see myself in 10 years from now, considering the EV perspective? And I told, I can see myself arrive at home, connecting my car to the charger, or just stopping in the wireless platform for the wireless charger. I see myself selling energy into the grid via an app and gaining some cash back for doing that in a certain period of time. What I mean is that the digitalization can facilitate the complete journey of the electrical vehicle and can bring a lot of convenience and benefits for the users if we use that well from the government perspective. And when I say government, I mean, we have the mission to decarbonize. And how to do that, considering we don't have 100% electrical energy metrics available to generate only based on wind, hydro, power plant, solar, etc. Renewable energy is more available sometimes in specific period of the day, and the fleet could have a specific mission to absorb the excess of renewables to be used in different time of the night, for instance. So for me, the secret behind EVs is the hidden potential we have with the fleet to use that to store energy when it's convenient and transport it back to the grid when it makes sense, right? That's one part of the question. Following on the preamble you shared with us, Professor, I agree that we have an important challenge in Brazil when it comes to fast charging. Some regions, the grid is not prepared for 300, 600 or megawatt charging hub, as we can easily find now in Europe, US. So there's some kind of collaboration from the DSOs and also incentives that will be needed to make it work appropriated. As I mentioned, I found myself in a risky scenario with only 5% battery and no other chargers within 50 kilometers. So if this charger was not there, I would be able to continue my trip. That's when the global strategy makes the play in the game. You know, if you without the incentives, I don't see the fast charging infrastructure moving forward in Brazil. And that's we as a nation, we need to understand what makes sense for us. We can continue in ethanol. It makes sense for us in the short period of time. But I think that was mentioned by Fernando. What about the technological risk to be isolated from the rest of the globe with ICE only in Brazil or maybe India, and China, US, and Europe really focusing on electrification? The platforms for developing the car could be totally different, and maybe you won't be able to take an EV from Europe and adapt to ICE in Brazil or India. So I think this also needs to be considered in the mid and long term. But I'm happy to say that Brazil has different strategies and possibilities that other nations don't have, and we need to play that game quite well from the nation perspective. I hope I answered your question.
I have 3 questions from the audience. First, I will give the floor to Philip because he wants to make a comment. Then we will hear the 3 questions, and then the panel will answer them according to the designation of who is the speaker that has been questioned. And then we will prepare for the transition to the final session. The final session today has to do with low-income households and intensive use of energy. And this has to do with partially of what Professor Ricardo mentioned, the complexity of Brazil. I mean, the distance between the have and the have-not is increasing, and Brazil should be prepared eventually even to receive some intensive energy industries. So how to prepare for this? So this is going to be the transition for the next session. But first, Philip, the 3 questions, and then the panel. Philip?
Okay, it's just a short comment from the European perspective to the charging infrastructure. So we work with companies and also cities, and especially within the city limits, and also cities who are on the top of the development basically already have a lot of charging infrastructure in place. Also focus on slow charging infrastructure, AC charging, as people live usually within the city limits and they don't have the time pressure to charge it. And if you apply the bidirectional charging, you have even the opportunity to get the surplus of renewables, especially prevalent from wind production in the night, to use this and shift energy load a bit in these hours. And basically it's promoted in the way that when you wake up in the next morning, you have a full tank. What is it might a difference to if you have a full driven car? Like you have always a full car on the next morning. So it's more like a positive thing because you're sleeping and you don't have this fast or this time pressure on it so much.
Thank you, Philip. Let's have the 3 questions now. First of all, introduce yourself and then the question, please.
Okay, my name is André Ferrares. I'm from the company Tupi. And first, I would like to propose a similar exercise like the professor did about how much energy to put inside the car. To mention that we always say that Brazil has a very clean energy metrics. This is true compared to the others. However, we have a lot of homework still to do because in electricity, we are 85. Last year was 92% clean. However, it is representing part of 20% of total primary energy used in Brazil. And in primary energy, we are 46, 48% clean. So it's still a way to go. Yeah, just to see how is the challenge of infrastructure in general. Yeah, how much this volume of energy is necessary for the modifications we are talking about. But my question is a step behind, and I would like to address to Roberto, is in terms of vehicle transition, we did the one 150 years ago from animal traction to vehicles. And when we did that, all the transformations give us electric vehicles, later on combustion vehicles. And all these decisions about what will be mainstream took around 50, 60 years. before we really decide for one solution. Seems to me that we are in difficult to embrace the reality that we need to live long life for multiple energy options. And but however, many presentations I still see someone trying to give the golden bullet for the end and discussing transition. As transition, we will have a lot of transitory, but only one final deal. And that was because we were used to that in the past. So my question is, should we go for one direction or embrace multi-energy scenario?
Thank you. Thank you. Your question? Oh no, the second question is over there, yeah. And then you, Christian, you will be the third.
So, Roger from Volkswagen. Also, my question is also for Professor Schäfer. You among the possibilities that you showed in your presentation, you showed something called alcohol to jet. Should I consider this a threat for the automotive industry?
Christian?
Okay, Christian Oberst from the German Economic Institute. I speak more in the next session. I have one general question and one specific question to Paulo Roberto. Maybe the specific one is very short. Is it this volatility over the battery really good? Because usual batteries don't like when they're just loaded a little bit and then unloaded and then loaded again. So aren't there other options for storing volatile energy better because I destroy my batteries with it? And the more general question is, I learned a lot about ethanol today. We discussed a lot of e-mobility, and I learned yesterday at the dinner that in Sao Paulo you cannot drive your car every day. So we have the issue of space. Like if we have renewable fuels, we don't solve another problem, and that is space, that is congestion. So a lot of discussions we have in city development is to go away from the individual car and maybe find other modes of transport. Is there any discussion on that in Brazil?
Okay. Roberto first, and then Paulo Roberto.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. It's interesting that you mentioned that, let's say, it took us, let's say, 100 years or something like that to have this energy transition. And now we have to do something else very fast in 20-something years. This is an important point. All energy transition we had so far, they happen by themselves. They are natural transitions. Let's say it was natural to move from wood to coal, from coal to oil, eventually from coal to natural gas or electricity, because we're always moving to something better and something cheaper. For the first time, we're not moving to something better. It's not that easy to say that an electric vehicle is better than an internal combustion engine. It's not. It's more expensive. It takes much longer for you to charge, so it's not better. That's why this energy transition has to be engineered. It's not going to happen by itself. And if you were to engineer something and you don't know exactly which technology will be the winner, I have to agree with you. You have to think about many strategies. We have to think about many strategies here in order to be able to let's say, to solve the problem. And make a connection to what I just said. I want to say something that I was going to say before. We haven't touched about other issues here. For example, the real solution for decarbonizing mobility in Brazil is not electric vehicle or biofuels. It's public transportation. The problem here, why we have in São Paulo such a big traffic jams? It's not because their vehicles are electric, or they're internal. It's because we don't have public transportation. So it's much easier, let's say, or it's needed, let's say, to invest in public transportation as a way to decarbonize. And by doing that, it's much easier to decarbonize public transportation itself by electrifying, for example, buses, electrifying subways, where subways are electric. And this also raises another issue here. I saw in this table here a discussion on the need for public investment in electric chargers. I totally disagree with that. Most of the population of Brazil will need public transportation, not electric chargers for the high middle class of Brazil to run their cars. It's much cheaper for the government of Brazil to improve the mobility of the population by investing much less in public transportation, and let's leave for those that can afford a car to pay for the chargers. As Ricardo said, most of the population of Brazil will charge their cars at home. You don't need major investments for that. You only need major investment if you want to have, let's say, charges in places for people to charge their cars in half an hour. This is not exactly a public concern in Brazil. The public concern is to improve, really, let's say, public transportation, bicycle lines and things like that are much more effective to decarbonize the transport sector in Brazil than electrification or biofuels. Concerning the other comment about the alcohol to jet, I don't see the alcohol to jet route as a threat to the, let's say, to the auto industry in Brazil. I see it as a big, let's say, possibility for the biofuels sector in Brazil. Because based on the discussion we had today, somehow a decision has been taken already to electrify mobility. And let's say we're not going to have the world producing close to 100 million cars per year electric, and 2 million non-electric cars for Brazil. So basically, the decision to electrify mobility has been taken already. So what's left for the biofuels industry in Brazil is exactly what I tried to say in my presentation. Let's go to those niches that cannot be electrified. In that case, shipping, aviation, eventually petrochemicals and things like that. These are the real niches that are left for the biofuel sector, and also heavy trucks and things like that. So I don't think it's a real threat for the auto industry because a decision has been taken already by the auto industry. Thank you.
Okay, so starting with the fourth question about the batteries, if it's the best in the EV, when you have this battery in EV, if it makes sense to push and take out the energy into the grid and the consequence for the battery itself. I'm not a specialist in battery, to be honest, but what I've observed among the group we are working on is that the battery is endless story starting now because there's so much investment, so new technology being discussed that I cannot confirm it could be a problem now for the technology we have in place, but could not be a real concern within 2-3 years with the new technology that could come. So it's hard to say when really vehicle grid will be in place, which I believe is something between 5 to 10 years from now, that the battery won't be able to handle this energy flow, right? I hope you're happy with my question, but that's what I understand at this moment. Second step, and well, thanks, Professor Roberto, to bring also your point of view. And I complement on top of that. So from Siemens' perspective, transportation in the bigger cities are electrified and shared. So we believe in public transportation in general. That's why you deliver solutions for subways, trains, also within the group. And we do believe in shared EVs for big cities such as São Paulo. And actually, a report from McKinsey indicated that in Brazil, the sectors that will lead the electrification are e-buses, e-trucks, and EVs used by app drivers such as Uber, 99, that is present in Brazil. And I see in São Paulo red a need for fast chargers, not for long distance, but for this shared transportation. I have been talking with some Uber drivers that are dealing with these new e-cars they received with certain incentives. And the main pain they have now is they drive 200, 250 kilometers, and they need to wait 8 hours to continue driving. And that's not feasible for the business. I mean, some Ubers and 99 drivers, they drive more than 300 kilometers per day. And that's where we believe we could support with fast chargers. And in this application, to be honest, the financial scenes, it's profitable already, because fast chargers are being used so massive in the city of São Paulo by these app drivers that is already paying the investment. So we don't need the government to put money in that. So it's a good use case to start with. Yeah.
We are almost at the closing. So we have, first of all, to thank our panelists. And definitively, what we had at the beginning of this afternoon now is the topic of innovation from different perspectives. First of all, how to mobilize a community. Then we had this challenging way of thinking, taking two large sectors that has to do with air transportation on one side and maritime mobility. Then we heard two industries. One side, Bosch, what they are doing in trying to combine different sources of energy, and then Siemens engagement in electric chargers. What is the common challenge that we have in this discussion? Is the issue of governance. How do we move from the present situation to the transition and to the desired situation? When we hear Roberto, that brought us quite a stimulating reflection, air transportation, IATA, and the IMO are such complex sectors. They have difficulty to get an agreement among themselves. How are we going to bring them together and also to bring the Brazilian dimension? So I feel that what we were able to do this afternoon before moving to the next topic is to focus on innovation, but at the same time to understand that there is a challenge regarding the governance. And this discussion is something that in some way we will be doing tomorrow. There is some other dimension that also will be done tomorrow. How to prepare the engineers for the new era. Because in each one of those presentations, what we have is another type of mindset for engineering. And we have a session tomorrow afternoon before the closing regarding education. And we hope that most of the panelists will help us to think about these new curricula regarding engineers. We will have a break and we will come back to discuss, on one side, low-income households in a world where the distance between the have and the have-not are increasing, not only among nations, but inside nations. Because even in Europe, we have an increase of distance between the have and have-not. In Brazil, it's very visible. So how to deal with the have-not and to include them in our society. On the other side, we have the challenge of intensive energy industry. Obviously, Europe would like to keep them in Europe. We are open to receive some of them here as long as they are not polluting. And this is a second topic that we will be discussing after the break. So I want to thank again the panelists and have enjoyed the break with a lot of discussion of interaction among the participants. And we will be coming back here punctually at 4:05. Thank you very much.
Right, Professor Markovic. So we go to the coffee break and we should be back 4:05. I have only one message for the participants that maybe will not come tomorrow for the second day of the dialogue. So we want to invite you to answer the evaluation survey. It's online and available using the QR codes fixed in some points of the halls and of the auditorium. So you can also ask our team for a sheet with the QR code, okay? So thank you very much, and 4:05 we should be back here in the auditorium. Eu até pensei assim, uma coisa que podia fazer logo realmente direto, né? Sim, todo mundo estiver aqui. Não, acho que nós estamos bem. Nós temos, nós prevíamos lá, acho que 80, 90 pessoas, e nós estávamos temos com segunda-feira 90 inscritos aqui. Não estou preocupado, não, porque não vai todo mundo com a experiência. Estava mais preocupado com a lotação do auditório, porque a gente tinha 500 inscritos, uns 300 de São Paulo, e aí a gente pensou que talvez a gente chegasse uns 150. A gente reservou comida, catering para 130, 150, e tivemos menos. Mas é sempre assim.
A menos que se crie Especialmente porque você está transmitindo também online.
Isso.
Vocês estão tendo uma estatística de quem está...
Tem, nós começamos com 40, 60, 40 no inglês, com 40 no inglês e 20 no português. Depois me disseram que aumentou, já estávamos com uma audiência já maior, uns 80 pessoas
Depois tem que
online.
editar os vídeos e colocar à disposição. É isso.
Não, eles já vão ficar, a própria FAPESP já separou o dia de hoje, por exemplo, em 4 blocos. E nós, eu não sei, o nosso site também está dividido em 4 transmissões hoje, que nem a
Não,
FAPESP.
só uma transmissão. A gente colocou tudo no mesmo.
Ah, numa só. A
Amanhã
FAPESP
tem outra transmissão.
Ah, então depois tem que partir, né?
Vai ter que partir. Tem que
Ninguém aguenta olhar.
fechando.
Já que a gente queria te entrevistar, tudo bem?
Com prazer.
Se puder
Agora?
acompanhar.
Vamos.
Tirar
Técnica na escuta. Técnica, vocês estão na escuta. São vocês que vão me dar o ok da transmissão para a gente começar aqui no auditório? Quem que me dá esse ok, então? Tá joia, obrigada. Tá joia, obrigada. Ele vai começar a falar. Até subir, tudo. Não.
I I did it yesterday on my phone. I finished it.
can't speak before me. So forward,
Okay.
backward,
And I see my
And-
slides. That's good.
and
my
here the,
notes.
the laser pointer is this.
Oh, you see your notes, huh? I hope.
No, as soon as
Okay.
they told me you don't see it, because otherwise I could also have it here.
That would be nice, right?
Yeah, I put the paper here. Let me just see. They said to me as soon they go there, I see the big slide. So I need my. Look, at the moment I see my notes, but it's not the entire.
It's not representation.
Yeah, it's this one, but then they put it, then it's here gone, I think.
Probably, yeah. When I switch over.
But anyway, here I cannot read it so little.
It's like you'll be standing there like this.
Standing like this.
Do you know they had in the 1990s for the Game Boy, they had a so-called light
Just see how this does not fall. This I don't need. Ja, I know. Ach so. Und das da brauchen wir dann auch. So, ne? Mein Schildchen nehmen wir ab. Sieht blöd aus, ne? Ja.
Para frente, se precisar voltar.
Mas essa não é a minha apresentação.
Não, quando for a sua,
tá.
sempre. E aqui, esse é o laser point, é essa flechinha.
Ok.
Tá bom?
Para frente, para trás.
Isso.
Let's begin now our last session for the first day. Integrate the several sessions. We began with this large overview of challenges of global energy transition and opportunities for new partnership. See the word new, and this is an invitation for Brazil and Germany to become more and more partners. Energy transition is something that has been discussed between Germany and Brazil for many years. This is not a new theme. This is a theme that has been coming. And then we went to acceleration of transition to a carbon emission-free energy system. Then in the afternoon, we began with the issue of technological innovation. But now, what we are going to discuss, differently from all the other themes, are the destinatory. Who is our destinataire? For whom are we concerned in serving? And then the organizer decided to put on the same session the two sides of a coin. On one side, the low-income households, the excluded, the ones that don't have access at an accessible energy. And on the other side, the industry that generates employment, generate the payment of taxes, generate the opportunity of development, which are the industry which are energy intensive. So what seems to be contradictory, it's part of the same system. On one side, the low-income households, on the other side, generate income. And obviously Brazil would like to be an attractive opportunity, an attractive possibility for those industries that are clean and they would like to establish them in Brazil. So we have the privilege to have with us Vera Felbermeier from BASF, Márcio Giannini Pereira from CEPEL, which is the Research and Development Center of Eletrobras, and Christian Oberst from the German Economic Institute. It's a rare opportunity to have on the same table, on one side, the provider of energy, on the other side, the industry, and on the third side, the Economic Institute. I will give the floor in a minute to Márcio Giannini Pereira. But before that, I would like to leave a question to Vera. She is a member of the VID board in Brazil, which is the Association of German Engineers. So my question is to the engineer, not to BASF. As an engineer, when you see those challenges in terms of transition, which are the three main challenges to move from what we were to where we want to be? How do you see the bottlenecks? And how engineering can help to move on to this design. But the question is not to be as effort. The question is to the engineer. I will leave you with the question, but we will have your answer after the two other presentations.
Okay, so
Thank you. Now we have Márcio Giannini Pereira, who is a researcher at the Electric Power Research Center, CEPEL. CEPEL already is a very traditional center. Since the 70s, it has been doing research. And the reason why Márcio was invited is because, beside the fact that he is teaching also at COP and he is part of the editorial board of a magazine on energy, but the fact that he has several papers on the issue of low-income households, how to deal with these challenges in Brazil and in the world. So the floor is yours, and feel free to also to approach the issue of intensive energy industry if you feel like.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank
15
you.
minutes.
First of all, I'd like to thank this opportunity. I'm sure that we are at the right place to make a dialogue with industry, with the researchers, and so on. Thank you. And oh, sorry. Okay. My presentation is about energy transition and energy poverty in Brazil. I'd like to talk about energy poverty and with another kind of approach, social approach. Here we're talking about most of the time about technology. So in this moment, I invite the audience to make some reflections, to make some perspective, different perspective of view, mainly about electric power. In Brazil, of course, around the world too, because it's not only the problem in Brazil. We have around 1 billion people around the world without electricity today. So in Brazil, of course, we have a lot of for tasks in the past. We have around 1 million of people, around 1 million, but we have more challenge for the future about this. I'd like to talk first about hegemonic view, about energy transition. Any kind of solution to climate change is likely to be based on four elements: low power consumption, better efficiency, switching from fossil fuel to other forms of energy and capture, besides the carbon storage. Sorry. What about the critique about energy transition? This kind of approach doesn't address behavior issues. It's a very important question today. Heavily focusing on technology. Social questions are secondary and doesn't address historic questions. Issues associated with ethics and justice are not covered or are incipient today. You have to highlight this point about justice. So we have to invite you to make some reflection and propose a fair energy transition, or just energy transition for all. It's not possible to talk about energy transition in the world or in Brazil without first equation, energy poverty. Otherwise, it's a dead concept. In Brazil, you have a lot of actions about energy poverty or rural electrification with many companies, many institutions, but most of them without coordination. It's a problem, it's a challenge, because of course you go further, but without coordination. So we spend a lot of money, sometimes without the impact desired. For example, recently we have we have a Luz para Todos program, Light for All, expand access to electricity around 60 million people. It's bigger than the population of Portugal. It's a huge number. And it's an interesting program and very, very recognized in the world. Current challenge, I said before me, we have a lot of problem about inflation, tariff inflation. For example, 1999 until now, you have around 30% of inflation. Of course, you have impact of industry and household too. You have to infront, you have to make a solution for them. Other question today is about the no techno losses. I suppose that you know that last week the light company, light utility, the one of the bigger company in Brazil, electric power utility, was broken. Recovery, judicial recovery now. So we have one problem there, but I'm sure that a lot of companies has the same problem today. You can see in this map around 15.6% of the regular techno losses. It's a huge number. Other questions, it's about lack of definition or consensus about energy poverty in Brazil. But it's not only for Brazil. Europe has the same problem too. We have energy poverty, energy vulnerability, energy equality, energy justice, sustainable energy development. A lot of terms, a lot of concepts, but it brings some problems to policy, to public policy, in the same way the impact of that. For example, we have a lot of officials documents. Most of them doesn't mention energy poverty or just one mention. It's shown us this is a challenge today. Some metrics, it's important to show some metrics in Brazil today. For example, as I said, and we have around 1 million people without electricity today. When you talk not only about the connection, it's okay, not okay, but we have go further. But in the past, we have a bigger problem. But when you're talking about no quality, a lot about supply, we have 19 million of people today. Or when you're talking about delay, we're talking about a delay of the electric bill, we're talking about 36 million people until 81 million people. It's a huge number. So we have a lot of challenges, but what is the priority? We need to think about it. There will be no just energy transition without an approach that includes social aspects. Our approach, we have to include this in this research, social aspects, not only economic aspects, engineer aspects, but social aspects too. To work together, many of approach, maybe you can bring better solution. Until now, you don't have solution for this situation in Brazil, both in rural area, both in urban area. In this case, I show you social approach. Name of this approach is social energy. We include production, heating, transport, cooking, education, health, lighting, gender and ethnic minorities, and so on. We need to put in the same place all these kind of subjects so as to try to find the better solution. If not, you can offer the same solution. In other words, no solution till now, as I said about the light company. Energy must be integrated as a key element for changes in the territory and materialization of solutions to promote health and well-being to the populations. We don't forget the object of the energy. We have to promote the well-being. We have to promote the health for the people. Most of them don't have the opportunity to bring with itself. So the state and the private companies must be think about this situation and propose new kind of solutions. Which areas of collaboration? It's important to highlight. Of course, here we have a lot of experts about electric car, green hydrogen, safe energy, and so on. But how can I do it? Which areas we can collaborate with Germany and Brazilian people or institution? Low carbon technology, of course, climate protection, rural development, gender issues, it's very important, education training, water, health, waste management, and so on. We have a lot of opportunity to exchange ideas, to learn each other, not only one way, the both way. The last one, I have a question for the audience. We have a macroeconomic panel, macroeconomic situation, hard to find a solution today. In Brazil, as the same in Europe, for example, food price increase, loss of wage mass, high unemployment rate, high interest rates. So, is it possible to make progress on energy poverty issues under macroeconomic uncertainties without the presence of long-term public policy, including social aspects? It's my perspective, it's my question for the audience. I will be very happy to listen to you. Thank you for this opportunity. Congratulations.
What Marcio brought to us is the one that are left behind. And those that are left behind, beginning with energy, they will be left behind also in terms of the transition in the digital area. Because if they don't have electricity, they will not have the opportunity to have access to what today most of the people in this room have access to: knowledge, to information, to data, to solving problems. And so we are leaving them behind twice, in terms of energy accessibility and in terms of digital accessibility. So this is a major issue for Brazil. And you see, for the ones that are coming from overseas, on one side we are discussing how to charge cars very quickly, but on the other side we have more than 1 million people that don't have access to any type of energy. This is Brazil. This is what we have to face. This is how to have to bridge among the extremes of our society. So that in this context, we will leave obviously to Marcio how to bring this bridge, how to bridge among those extremes. And he showed a diapositive, a slide, talking about non-technical losses. For the one that didn't understand what do mean non-technical losses, this means that people are having access to energy, but they can't pay for it. So in some way, this will be interrupted at some time, and they will lose this accessibility. And he highlighted two large areas, the Amazon and Rio de Janeiro. These are the two extremes in terms of what he called non-technical losses. The Amazon, with all the challenges that this means, but also the opportunity for solution, because there is the possibility of decentralized, through solar energy and others, the possibility of having access to a reliable energy. And in the case of Rio de Janeiro, we are talking about a concentration of favela, and there is a political and social issue that is much more specific to the large cities in Brazil. Having said that, now we will move to Christian Oberst. Please, Christian, take the floor. Christian is part of the International Network for Economic Research. He is the vice president, the vice chair of this network. Since 2018, he is a senior economist for housing policy and real estate economics at the German Economic Institute. Obviously, Christian also teach and provide the young generation with knowledge and experience. Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The invitation to come here. And I have the challenging task to talk about both topics now. Two very different groups, low-income households and industry. We usually don't discuss them in one panel. In our institute, we have usually different research groups working on it. But yet, when I prepared the presentation, I found out that they face very similar problems and trade-offs. They also compete about the same resources a bit, at least in the energy crisis, about the gas shortage. I will show it later. And while they are very different, they're also not unrelated. Because, of course, I mean, stable industry jobs with decent wages, with providing upward mobility, are important for regional growth, are important for economic growth. And as more we have, or if we have them, we will have less low-income households. So if we lose these industries due to high energy prices, we will face that our households, I don't say they will become poor, but they will be less wealthy. So we have, of course, an interest to keep it. I will not go into specifics too much. I will try to face on the trade-offs, and I try to maybe provoke some discussions for later, not just for the panel, but also for our reception later. And I like to start with a quote. I usually use this in housing markets because I'm from the housing market real estate field and something regional development. And I always say all generalizations are false, including this one. Meaning I will simplify, I will argue with averages, and everyone in the room knows it, but we sometimes forget. Especially, each real estate object is a unique object. It's not a homogeneous good, it's a very heterogeneous good. And on industry, sometimes at least some economists, we do like industries are the same. But industry is very, very different. We have the different sectors. But even when we take the chemical part, we have BASF here, which in Germany has a very integrated system around Ludwigshafen. We have a similar company like Bayer, which is which is in Leverkusen, close to Cologne, that are very different little companies that cooperate each other. You cannot take just one company out and the rest keeps on working. They're all related to each other, even though they're not formally one company. It's a chemical park. So we have different sectors, but even in the sectors, we have very different management styles. So I just say that sometimes remind that of course for a discussion, we need to simplify. And on the end, I write that the views are my own, not of the Institute. It's just because I talk about a topic that is also from another research unit. And I don't want to, so I'm the housing expert, I'm free to speak. On industry, I just take this as a security. Maybe because the German Economic Institute is a bit different from the institutions presenting so far here, let me very briefly say what it is. So the IW is the largest private economic research institute in Germany, meaning we have our big competitors or colleagues from the IW in Berlin, from the IFO in Munich. They have our state, they're from the state, and we get the main funding from the employers associations. So we are usually business friendly, close to the industry. And we work a bit on the intersection of academia, policy, and business research. But if I have to say, every day's work is probably very similar. We do third-party funded projects. We do this for state agencies. We do this for private companies, and we do this for foundations. So this is not very different. What is maybe a bit different is that we need to be up to date. We need to be quick, and maybe the academic paper in the best journal is important, but it's a little bit less important. It's also good if we just support the debate with information, with transparency. So we see ourselves as the advocate of the social market economy. And what does it mean, social market economy? It's a very German concept, and it means we use the power of the market as an engine of growth, but we combine it with the principle of social justice. And with this, we have a constant debate, how much should the state intervene, where should he intervene, and there is not always one right solution. It's of course along the political spectrum, how much you want to intervene. Maybe this, if you're more interested in the Institute, you can come later to me and talk about it. We are about 400 employees, about 100 that are mainly as researchers in economics, and we cover almost all topics in economics, except sadly agriculture. That is the one topic that falls down. Maybe one day in a few years I will do it, but currently not. And maybe why am I here? We're also part of the Copernicus project Ariadne, and maybe not with the thing you said, like, okay, we're close to the industry, the employers association, but we take part as the housing market team, and we are part of the heat and housing hold panel. So about a survey that collects information about it. And there our motivation is that we have insufficient investment in buildings to achieve our goals. And we have a very tricky landlord-tenant investment dilemma, which I will go into a bit, because Germany has a very low home ownership rate. And now both sides blame the other one to invest in energy modernization. The landlord is responsible for the main building infrastructure, but the tenant is responsible for how he behaves, how he invests. So, and with that, we have just an institutional barrier that is far away from just cost-benefit analysis that stops investigation. So with this, I go a bit into more since where we are, these are the sectors. I mean, I really like the presentation from Roberto Schiffer that said you need an integrated system. And as economists, we said for years, it doesn't matter in which sector we save. We should save there where it's the most, where it's the cheapest to save. But politics works sometimes different. We need to have sector goals. And up to 2020, maybe 21, I could show the slide and show the building sector is below. All other sectors were in line. So we have the energy industry on top. We have then the general industry with the blue line, transport, building, agriculture, and waste management. So building, it doesn't look like this, but they really were behind their goals. But then, of course, with Corona and now the Ukraine war, everything changed a bit. So we saw the energy industry was very well on their goal. And since then, it rebounded back. Of course, there's a lot of coal production in it. And we have the nuclear phase-out, something we didn't mention here today, which is maybe a big discussion in Germany. I sometimes say, and now I said my own view, it's like a discussion from the undead. It's something they lost the debate on nuclear phase-out. And now when the opportunity is there, they try to argue it again. Of course, on the first side, it looks very promising to use the nuclear facilities, but then it's complex. The uranium, where does it come from? It comes from Russia. We had it. It's an atomic nuclear plant. You just not have a switch where you pull it on and off. So, but there are two sides they're debating. I think this will be just remaining a debate, and we see. But here, of course, it increased the CO2 emissions. So we have this trade-off between climate protection and maybe environmental security on the other hand, where both sides are sustainable, but only one can win. Yeah, so we see industry is important. It went a bit down, but this was because production went down. And maybe this is also not what we want. So I go maybe more now, I start with the energy productions. And here what we see is in light blue, it's the production index for industry in total. And in dark blue, the one for the energy intensive industry. So we focus first on the energy intensive industry. We see maybe until the 81, and the headline was, let's say in February, the slump is bigger than during Corona. It's bigger during the whole stop. So it's a really fundamental crisis. And there we see how we live in volatile times. The trend changed, like just a month later, and it looks much more prosperous with the 87. It's still way below systems. We also see that energy intensive industries, they had their peak somewhere in 2018. So we were at the end of a very long upswing, but especially industry was already on a turning point before all this Corona influence and war influence coming in. And so we see the other industry, it's quite stable. So this is here, which fear is behind this chart. I mean, it looks as this chart looks, but there's the fear of deindustrialization behind it. And you have to know, when we speak about industrial sector in Germany, it's not just one sector. It's the biggest industrial sector in Europe. We are a very industrial country still, in opposite to many other countries, and it's part of the wealth, of the success story of the German market economy. So I go one further. Oh yeah, it's come here. You see the big events, which we basically see the industry already anticipated a bit the stop. And of course, you have here a lot of the discussion is about speed. Sometimes it's not about the goal where we want to go. We want to have reduced carbon emissions. We want to reduce dependency from Russia. But the speed with what we do it, that's where we disagree and where we talk. Oh, I need to speed up. Here's the same thing. The prices, it's shown in the morning, the same time. It's got a bit better. The prices went down again. So the fear is for the next winter. We had some luck, it was a mild winter, etc. So here, just say that prices also worked. I mean, on the one hand, we said like prices are pushing the industry away, but high prices also led to savings. And there is a very good study, and it's openly available. I just say after the link, you can click on it. So, but the message is, so prices work of saving it, but now we need support policies to cushion hardship, because of course the price increase came very surprisingly, and everything that is surprisingly and is uncertain harms the economic development, because first nobody invests anymore. So the energy prices, it's not something new, it's a deferred problem. I show here a chart, an older one. The blue one is basically the electricity prices without, and we're much more expensive than the US, we're more expensive than Brazil, but in the European context we could compete. But if we add our levies and taxes on it, we are the most expensive location. And then we have companies like BASF who say like, with this high prices, we think we allocate more to the US. And of course, because with these prices, they cannot be comparable prices on their line. So there's something we could address. So it's for the industrial location a danger, even though it helps to reach our climate goals. So here, a short how it developed. So the prices, again, the blue one is the market price, the rest is the add up. So in 2020, more than half of the prices were actually taxes and levies. So when the crisis came then, this was also something you could cut down to very easily. So there are the details, I don't go into it. And then we had a break. So this was the net price break, and this accounts for 70% of your previous year consumption. These levies are helpful to keep, but these levies also always benefit the established industry. Like this type of protection is always for the ones who are already there, who already have the exceptions, and never for the much new industries. New companies in industry sector are not that common. This to the industry side. Let's quickly go to the heating costs. And we have here in blue, that were the heating costs in 2021. So low income on the left, high income on the right. High income pays a bit less, but of course, relatively less to their income. And the yellow one is basically the extra charge that come on. So prices basically doubled. And with that, people were overburdened. So we needed to and it was not just the low income, because we have to say the very low incomes that receive welfare, there the electricity bill is covered by the welfare system. So it's exactly the group that is just out of the welfare system. And there it depends a lot in which type of dwelling you live. And so if you had here this, that we said, the price break, which I thought in the end, there was a relief as a one-time payment. It was good. There was that you could up to 80% of the previous year consumption. There was a price break, and for the rest, so there was still the intensive to save. As an immediate responsibility, I think as a second best solution was good. But of course, everybody profited from them. Also the high-income households. And this was because it was technically, legally not better possible, because we don't have the appropriate information to do it. And this will be the very end, how we could have better information. So maybe for the discussion, there are some trade-offs. There was even more trade-offs over the day. I hear we have between climate protection and environmental protection. We have, this is how I started to study economics, between jobs or climate. We have to shield people from high prices versus to incentivize consumption. We have in the housing market this affordable housing, because if we build a lot of houses, this will decrease the pressure on the housing market, but it's very energy intensive and it uses a lot of space. And if we modernize, this costs money, and if we put it on the prices, it's very hard to put this on the top of it. So this is a topic. We have this tenant versus landlord, and we have that climate protection is a global good, and it's a merit good, means we don't really see how useful it is. We don't see it. It's a bit like an insurance, right? We always underestimated what we need. So and subsidiarity is the opposite. We usually want to have policies as much as possible on the local level. On climate change, it should be more a global framework. So what are the solutions? As I said, the temporary price cap that also kept incentives to lower consumption is, I think, the way to go. It works in the first year. Not too sure how it works further on. The relief package was okay, but it went also to everybody. That was not targeted. We need to reduce uncertainty. So I heard we introduced for mobility and building, we will introduce a trading system like certificates. But to guarantee investments in that area, I personally think it's a good idea to put some frame line around it so that the prices are not as volatile. Because if these trading systems are too volatile, companies won't invest. But if they have an upper limit and lower limit, they can plan. And especially in buildings like it is useful. And so we need to increase supply and infrastructure. And the last point on behavior, many measures, of course, the price matters a lot, but also the perceived fairness has a big role if people accept the policies or if they rebel against it. And in a democratic system, it's not just to be right, you also need to get the majority behind you. And for this matters that the policy is perceived fair. So things I couldn't show that much is like this energy performance certificates, which is a very tiny tool and you probably didn't think much about it, but they're very important for market transparency on all links for policy instruments. I will skip that, they are in the slides. And the last thing I show you here is, these are the costs according to energy efficiency levels. So on top is the highest level, on the bottom is the lowest level H, the worst energy efficiency standard. And the distribution here shown is all the prices we have for homeowners in similar houses. So we say this is an energy efficient house, and yet with that information we cannot predict how high the need for energy is, because it depends on many more factors. So I like the presentation today from Volkswagen because it shows just with information for the consumer we can reach a lot. Thank you a lot. I will add the main papers that you can read. They're all linked here. This is usually, if you read 2 of them, it's very good. And thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Christian. Obviously, we will open now the question that the floor will address, but I will take the privilege of being the moderator to set a question for each one of the panelists. First, to Vera, as an engineer, which are the main challenges for the transition? To you, Marcio, if you were a decision maker at the policy level, Secretary of State in Rio or Minister of Energy, what would be your action regarding mitigating poverty, electricity poverty? And finally, to you, Christian, how many of those solutions are being implemented in Germany? So there are one question for each one of the panelists. I would like to know from the floor, if there are questions, please stand your hand. Not for the yes, one. So let's have the three question addressed, and then we will give you the floor. Please, madam.
Okay. Yeah, quite general question, and I had enough time to think about my answer. I don't know if it's better than. Yeah, from a more general perspective, each engineering or engineers generation had its challenges in the history. Yeah? If it was health, wealth, aerospace, industrial evolution. So all this kind of effort that engineers did made our life better. Our future engineers, the generation that starts now, from my point of view, from my belief, has the biggest challenge ahead. Because you engineers, young engineers and future engineers, you have to protect or even rescue our planet. So this is quite a big burden that future engineered generation will carry. And for this, I think it's utmost important that also universities can play their role and teach this even further. Your mindset and your awareness and your attitude in your personal life is crucial. Yeah? So only engineers that are convinced of that this is ahead of us, and if we don't act now, further generation won't need engineers anymore. I don't want to paint it too black. And here I believe also here in Brazil, but also in other countries and in Germany as well. Yeah, even if we glue our hands on the streets, this does not mean that our mindset is already there where it should be. And what I observed in my 5 years here in Brazil, there is also room for improvement in our daily life, how we waste our value, our environmental value. Yeah. But being more concrete, as I showed, until 2030, we have solutions. Yeah, and even even if not, then we have carbon capture solutions that we can in the midterm also use. But from 2030 onward, to really reach all our goal, 2050 being net zero, there is a lot to to develop and to discover. Yeah, so many, also in our chemical industry, many of our processes, we don't see now a solution to make them really carbon or zero carbon free from our current perspective. So there must be a solutions, new development that really helps us on this way. You know? And the third point is, and this is already now very crucial, industry like mine, companies like mine, they invest in these things also only when they have a kind of payback, if they know how to invest into these technologies. We cannot finance this without this. So having, beside the technical skills, you should always have in mind how to promote it also from a beneficial cost point of view. And we have to bring into the decision makers suggestions. We have to bring even more the decarbonization benefits into the evaluation of our business cases. So without this, we will not convince the companies.
Thank you so much, Vera, for such a wise set of thoughts and recommendation. Thank you very much, Vera. Marcio, you just became Secretary of State of Rio or Minister of Energy, whatever you prefer. What would be the first 3 actions that you would take to eradicate poverty regarding the electricity access?
It's a great honor to be Minister of Mines and Energy in Brazil. Not sure. A lot of challenges in front of the situation, but I have opinion about the perspective, public perspective. We can mitigate the situation like energy poverty when you try to put the people as an active actor of the solution. I suppose that's the best way to find the best solution. But of course, you don't have one solution only. You have a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges to try to find the best solution. I was in England last week, and I knew an observatory of European energy poverty. It's a good opportunity to learn with them, with European, about the situation. In this situation, if you create this kind of solution in Brazil, institution, organization, and so on. I'm not sure about the best way to what kind of solution is, but with this observatory in Brazil, it's possible to coordination actions, to have governance. You have more opportunity to attract funding, to attract training too. So I suppose that this 2 opportunities to find the best solution today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope that we have other opportunity to explore this idea of an observatory. An observatory is not only looking, but also engaging the actors to find solution, as you said, and they are diversified. Before giving the floor the question, Christian, how many of those solutions that you listed are being implemented in Germany?
I mean, the gas price break, the electricity break, they were done, and there were many more. So I just took some selected. I have sometimes the feeling our politicians are very busy, and sometimes they do maybe too much. Because I give you an example. We have, a few years ago, for energy modernization, we had 3,500 different subsidy schemes to support that from federal, state, and municipality level. Sometimes you can combine them, mostly you couldn't combine them, but nobody had the overview. We have 2 different energy certificates that are both insufficient, but don't hold the same motivation. what else we have? We have a lot of short-term especially at the moment, and so short-term activities. While we know that, let's say, the real estate sector, as energy companies, as industry companies, they need reliable policies. They need long-term planning. Of course, you can change policies, but you cannot overnight change it and then 3 months return it again. And we had that the recent years, and this doesn't help. So you need to have a reliable policy. And sometimes, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but the old Tinberg rule, one objective, one policy, one agency, with no conflict within the agency, could be helpful.
Very good rule. The question.
Yeah, it goes for Marcio, as you had expected. I'm not sure about whether the access is still a huge problem. You mentioned the 1 million, but looking at one of your slides, you started at a very low level, and with the program you mentioned, the situation has changed completely in the last 15, 20 years, and it is a huge success. And so you can really be proud on that, or what you've done is really great. But the question is, what has done the society with all the energy access? And therefore my question goes more in that direction. Is it not the access a problem anymore, but what is done by poor communities? Are all the chances they could have, really supported by the government? Should there be not so more capacity building, for a particular in that direction, that they learn to use modern energy for their own entrepreneurships? That means that they are not using it as a consumer good, but also as a chance, for example, to be active in regarding slow, little, but very important economic activities for these communities. And to your last question, you wanted also an answer, I presume. I would turn it a bit different. I would say they have to, or the situation is as it is, but to have success, you will not have a long-term macroeconomic policy support, because it's politics, and politics are changing their minds. So for the success of the second success story would be if you could introduce a policy, as a seed policy, and a beginning policy, which after some years get functioning for the people without any additional support. That's my answer to your question.
Thank you, Vitor. Marcio?
Thanks, Professor Witold. I'm not sure if I have an answer for your question. Probably the government try to find the answer too, but of course you need to go further just only consume of energy. You need to include the producers too. You have to include the perspective of the generation of income. This can be the best way to do it, but we don't have a lot of opportunity or a lot of experience in Brazil. You have one good experience with CCP, Centro Comunitário de Produção, by Eletrobras in the past, and another experience to Caixa Econômica Federal in Bahia, using solar panel to income generation too. It's a good experience, but we need more experience to prove that it's worth. But of course, we need money, you need the funding for this, you need the regulatory framework. Today, you don't have regulatory framework. Today, it's a big challenge for us. The second question, I don't remember. Sorry.
Try to answer your question you made to the to all of us. You are right how to do it, and I think the most successful policy would be which starts and ends after 5 years, and all the communities can work without additional, or could work under the macroeconomic uncertainties, because they will not change. There will be good years as in the 2020s, but there will be also bad years, and all the world, at least the European perspective, is that the bad years will coming further on. So therefore, we will have macroeconomic uncertainties, and I think Brazil will also suffer on some of them. Maybe not directly, but we don't know. But the world is in a turmoil, and therefore macroeconomic uncertainties there will be, but they have to need some success.
Today we have a lot of challenges about macroeconomic issues, of course, but I'm not sure in the future it can be different in Brazil. So you have to be very innovative, try to find other kind of solution. Thank you.
I think the next is also to Márcio. You asked about you talked about the lack of energy for some part of population. My question is there any correlation between this indicator and some type of educational indicator?
Yeah. We have a lot of information about the situation. We have correlation about without electricity, you have a negative impact about education, but not only about education, about the health, about the income, about many issues around the family, many for the woman and the child. It's very interesting because in this situation, we need to rethink the situation of this kind of policy, include gender and gender approach.
So
education, of course.
The reason why I question you is you asked to us the long-term policy and so on. Would be not the case that the solution for the energy, lack of energy for some type of population, would pass through a long-term improvement of the educational indicators of the country? That's why I asked. Maybe there is this correlation. Solving quality of education, maybe it's a way to solve the lack of energy in households and
yes,
improve the life of the people and healthy and so on.
Thank you.
Well, hello. My name is Karen Mascarenhas. I'm from the Research Center for Greenhouse Gas Innovation. It's an engineering research center financed also by FAPESP. And my question is for Christian. Okay, I would like to ask you about how do you measure or access the public perception of what you mentioned about the perceived fairness and the social acceptance? How do you measure? What kind of instruments do you have for that? Thank you.
We have different techniques. One of them has the name of a choice experiment or a conjoint analysis. So you give different bundles and say, let's say you have this policy bundle A and policy bundle B. Which one would you choose? And then you have different characteristics. So this is one type of experiment in surveys we do. Another one is that we ask really what type of policy do you prefer, but we have some form of treatment effects. So we put a treatment in a control group and the one group receives the information and the other not. And we see if all other things equal, do they differ in their response? So this is, I think at the moment quite in to do. It's still based on surveys. So you need to trust that the survey population somehow represents the overall population. Partly it goes, perfectly it doesn't go.
Well, before concluding, let me build on Professor Witold and Marcio's comments regarding energy poverty. The discussion was centered mostly on large urban area and concentration of urban, which is not the case of part of the population in the Amazon. The population in the Amazon, beside 2 large or 3 large cities like Belém and Manaus, we have a major set of population that are in the rivers, close to the rivers. And the only solution that we saw is a combination of sources that would include biodigestores, solar, batteries, and the need, as Professor Witold said, of entrepreneurship. This means an attitude to innovate, to make sure that this combination will be driven to an association or to a cooperative. And so the energy will be a mean to generate wealth and to generate well-being, retaining the young population in those communities. The reason why I'm underlining this is because the Amazon will become more and more Brazilian responsibility, South American responsibility, and the global responsibility, and we know how it is important. So I do hope that one day we will have this observatory that Marcio just mentioned, and we would look at the Amazon region in its specificity, which is not what happened in large urban areas. And then we can learn from those communities and maybe expand those solutions to other communities in that region and maybe to other parts of the world. Having said that, we will be concluding this day, that it was a very enriching day. I will give the floor to Marcio. I would like, first of all, to thank the panel for not only the formal presentation that they brought, but also for this spontaneous idea that came at the end, and they will enlighten what we are taking home from this rich day. Tomorrow, there is a very interesting agenda that will build on what we discussed today, beginning with climate change and finishing with education. And the answer that Vera brought to us will be definitively a food for thought for the final session before financing. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, Christian.
Not working? Oh, now. Oh, okay. Thank you. So many thanks to all the speakers, chairs, and to the audience, including the online, and all the team for this first successful dialogue day. The second day, tomorrow, start at 9:30 tomorrow, okay? So to celebrate this meeting, and tomorrow, as Professor Markovic already said, so we have a very interesting agenda as well. So the keynote of Professor Joana Portugal Pereira from Rio de Janeiro, so about shifting development pathways, how to enable broader, deeper, and faster climate action. And the panel's policy and market requirements for a resilient and reliable low-carbon energy system, shifting supply chain dependencies following the energy transition and the role of the circular economy, and education for innovation and sustainable energy consumption. And closing the dialogue tomorrow, we will have a special session about funding programs from Germany and Brazil for research in R&D and university companies cooperation. We will have representatives here from FAPESP, DAD, DFG, Humboldt Foundation, and EMBRA-P. So see you tomorrow here. So to celebrate this meeting and give you more time for discussion about the topic and networking, the VEHA São Paulo and the Consul General of Germany in São Paulo, Ms. Martina Hackelberg, invite you for reception in her residence. Take the opportunity to discover new friends, talk to old ones, start partnerships, and promote scientific exchange, as well as cooperation between science, industry, policymakers, and public managers. In front of FAPESP, there is a bus that departs from here in a few minutes and will offer the one-way trip to the residence. The German delegation can take the usual transportation to the residence. If you go on your own, don't forget that the reception starts 6 p.m. 6:30, okay? So we have enough time to go there in Jardim Europa, okay? See you there, or tomorrow. Eu vou no ônibus. Até todo mundo descer.
Já pega aí.